From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In this solo podcast, after releasing 200 podcast episodes, I look back at my podcast journey, where I've been and where I'm going to go. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast. Hey everybody, Rob here again. In this podcast, I thought I'd share a little bit about my podcast journey and where we've gone. So about, 3.5 years ago, I had this brainstorm idea that I was tired of blogging. I'd written probably over 2,000 blog posts over a 10-year period for business and writing for clients. And I always liked the podcast space. I mean, I listen to podcasts all day long on my phone and on my computer when I'm working. And I thought, I had friends like Bob Dunn, Bob WP, who did episode 200 with me, who podcast. And I thought, geez, I should drop into the podcast realm. So I did. I dropped in and I started podcasting. I made a mistake early on, actually two big ones. First of all, I decided on a free podcast service, Anchor.fm. And second of all, I decided not to start one but two podcasts. The SDM interview show and a podcast called With Our CEO. With Our CEO is no longer in production. I think I did about 36 episodes. They're available on my website for historical reasons, but that's about it. And the SDM show, the SDM interview show is now morphed into the SDM show. And I kind of merged the two podcasts. So that was good news there. And the free service, Anchor.fm, well, about 7 or 8 months ago, I switched to Castos. And to be fair, I haven't been happier. Castos is amazing. The support is amazing. Frankly, for me, it's the right choice being a creative for podcasting. So I did well there. The reality is you don't want to self-host your podcast on your own website. You'll kill the bandwidth. So at time of this record, this is actually episode 201. I've done 200 episodes. I've had some amazing guests, a couple notable ones. Lately, episode 100 was done with my good friend Corey Miller of Post Status. Episode 200 was done with Bob WP, Bob Dunn, who's been an inspiration in this space to me. So that was good. And then you say, what do I prefer? Do I prefer solo shows or do I prefer interviews? I actually like them both, to be fair. Solo shows, I'll throw out tips or I'll take a topic like this one and talk for 5 or 10 minutes. Interviews, they're amazing if done right. And one of the things I like about the interviews is not only do I get my listeners, you the listener, information, I also learn along with you. Sometimes the guest I don't know well, sometimes I do. And I still always learn something. And that's really important. Let's now jump into how I record the podcast. In past, I've recorded podcasts on Google Meet. I've actually recorded podcasts on Zoom. I even did one podcast because of connection issues where I recorded with my friend Bob Rodkin on Skype and did that. And typically the way I like to do podcasts now is I've settled on Zencaster as a recording platform. And in all my podcasting, I've only had problems with one recording. And it actually happened recently, a couple weeks ago. I was recording a podcast and I lost power. of all dreaded things in the middle of the podcast. It was a flicker. And we went and recorded a second part, and I figured, I would record, just merge the two and do some editing. Well, Zencaster dropped the first part 40 minutes in. So the good news is we're going to re-record that podcast this week. So things happen. And my guests were more than gracious. And I want to shout out to Warren and Bridget. And thanks, guys. Much appreciated. And I look forward to recording with you later in the week. So that's kind of happened. And then how I do editing. I use Audacity. I love Audacity. In my podcast journey, I've been on Windows 10. I switched to Linux for a while, and I'm back on Windows 10. And I could go into Adobe editing software, other editing software, but frankly, Audacity is the way to go. Do I do live podcasts? That's interesting too. I did a couple around Christmas. We did a WordPress roundtable I did with Ryan Waterbury, Todd Jones, and Devinder Sinkan. And we talked about, some stuff like WordPress year in review. And I recorded that on Melon and it went really well. Except in that one, who had internet problems? Me, the host. Isn't that always the way? And we just kind of went with it. And things happen. And that's just the way it went. So when we were done, I took the Melon video recording, stripped out the video, and put out an audio in the podcast. Devinder and I also did a WP Weekly award show that we did the same way, where I live streamed it. And then we did that. And I'm thinking, as I move forward this year, I might do a little bit more of that, but I'm not so sure. We'll see. So that kind of covers that. My podcast right now is available on all major podcast platforms. And I made a decision about the beginning of the month, and at the time this podcast was released, it will also be available at YouTube as an audio only. So I've been working on that and getting the podcast up on YouTube. Just another way for people to listen to the podcasts and creating some playlists, and that should be done soon. So that's really, really good. Mentioned I use Audacity for editing, for doing show notes and the dreaded show notes. When I started, I put in a quick description. That was it. Then for a while, I did show notes with Otter.ai. Then I stopped. And then I made a decision I needed to do more show notes with Otter.ai. And I carried this on for several months. And then, frankly, I discovered Office 365 gives you 300 minutes of transcription. And I have two Office 365 accounts. So 600 minutes of transcription was enough to do my show notes for this podcast for a whole month. And not only do show notes, I also do show highlights. I always list 3 or 4 points on the Castos description, and I carry those over to my website. So that's how I do it. Promoting the podcast. Wow. Here's where I have a problem. Facebook does not allow me to post the stunningdigitalmarketing.com domain on it. So to share my podcast on Facebook, I actually post the Castos page for each podcast to promote it. And I'm not a big Facebook user anymore, so it doesn't really matter. And then on top of Facebook, I share the podcast link on both LinkedIn and I share it on Twitter. I also share it on my Google My Business page and my profile. And I'm looking at some other ways to promote it. One of the reasons why I started uploading to YouTube was to promote it. One of the things I've tried to do in my podcast is keep it more than just a WordPress show. Yes, it's very heavy WordPress feeling, but I also talk about business. And moving forward, I'm actually going to release a podcast on influencer marketing. I'm looking at doing a podcast on down the road on quizzes and how that can help your marketing and things like that. My friend Wyatt Waterbury and I have started a series. We're now 3 in about marketing for agencies and things agencies should do to help themselves. So we're working on those things, and they're kind of cool. I'm looking at doing some more partnerships. Up until now, I haven't done any ads in my podcast, but if somebody came knocking, I would probably take it. So that's kind of where the podcast journey has gone. And I have to say, I'm pretty lucky. I've managed to interview many guests, develop friendships, relationships, and I love the medium of podcasting. So here's to just being past episode 200. And I really hope that we'll be talking about episode 1000 someday. So that's my journey. Have a great day, everybody, and bye for now. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.